He's Peter King from Sports Illustrated and Football Night in America, the Monday morning quarterback, the mmqb.com, who joins us now. Before I get to the NFL stuff, Pete, best college football setting is where?
I'm probably unqualified, Dan. I only did that for 3 or 4 years when I first got into the business, but my favorite one was the Big House, by far. It just felt like football, and walking on that campus in Ann Arbor, it just felt like the coolest place. And that's why I failed in later years to get either of my daughters to go to the University of Michigan. Because as one of them said, my daughter Laura, she said, "Dad, as soon as you wanted me to go there, it was all over."
Wow. Did you cover Ohio State, Michigan?
Yeah, I did. I covered that game a couple of times. I covered it once in Columbus and once in Ann Arbor. It's a lot of fun.
Is there a pro setting that has a collegiate feel to it?
I'd say the only one that's really like that, is Lambeau. But you almost have to go to Lambeau for a rivalry game because it's so friendly. People are so nice. I remember Jerry Rice once saying, "It almost doesn't feel like the NFL. People are too nice here." But one time, one of my favorite games I ever covered at Lambeau, I covered. I was covering a Bears-Packers game. This was, I'd say, early to mid '90s, and I'll never forget driving over from Appleton, Wisconsin, on the way to Lambeau Field. Two things stick out in my mind. The rock station in Appleton, Wisconsin, was having a Bears Still Suck block party weekend. That was that was what they were saying on the radio. And then these two kids, they couldn't have been older than 9 or 10 years old. They knew the Bears team buses were going to be going by their place on the highway from Appleton to Green Bay before the game. And so they planned it. They saw the buses on the way, and they had a gigantic stuffed bear hanging in effigy from a tree. And they were beating the crap out of it with 2 baseball bats. And so that's the only thing I can, that's a little bit collegiate, isn't it?
Yeah. I thought Kansas City has that feel as well.
Yeah, you're right about that. Arrowhead does have that feel.
We're talking to Peter King from Football Night in America. All right, the biggest overreaction after 2 weeks is what?
That the Seahawks are done and all that. I mean, I've read and heard a lot of things in the last couple of days. I mean, look. Here's the bottom line. The schedule maker, Howard Katz, didn't have a sense of humor about the Seahawks when he put their schedule together because he has their toughest 2 games, in my opinion, at St. Louis, at Green Bay. And everybody says, wait a minute, in the first 2 games of the year, everybody says, at St. Louis, what are you talking about? Well, they're 1-3 in the Russell Wilson era at St. Louis. It's just been very, very hard for them to play there, and it's hard. They're a bad matchup for the Seahawks. So, I mean, had the schedule been reversed, had it been 2 games home with Detroit and Chicago first instead of Detroit and Chicago in weeks 3 and 4, would anybody be particularly nervous about the Seahawks right now? I think not.
Are you nervous about the Colts?
Yeah, but I didn't really love the Colts to begin with. I think the Colts were the best team in a bad division. Mm-hmm. And even though they did play the run decently last night, they still have yet to show that the Patriots, who rushed for 657 yards against them in their last 3 meetings, they still have failed to show that they can stop the run in a big game. And so I was never really in love with the Colts anyway.
What about the Jets? Are they legit?
Any team that plays that defense is absolutely legit, number one. And number two, I mean, on offense, they're not turning it over. And Ryan Fitzpatrick is getting the ball to the guys who he needs to get the ball to. I mean, Eric Decker is a very good number 2. John Gruden, I think, pointed it out last night. He's a lot more suited for that role than to be your mail carrier. Yep. Brandon Marshall likes the system. He likes being in New York. He's a happy guy. And so, I mean, I think right now they look like they're the biggest threats by far to the Patriots in the East.
How big is this game for the Eagles against the Jets?
I mean, no team has a bigger game this weekend. I mean, they go on the road again in week 4. They play 3 of their first 4 on the road. They just have to show that they can be competent at doing something. And the thing that has to be alarming to Chip Kelly is he's got to put his game plan together. You know, I'm sure he's watched a lot of the Jets now, and he's watching his offensive line, and he's got to walk in there and he's saying, guys, I have no idea what we can do against this team. And that's the biggest problem, because if your quarterback doesn't have any time, and Sam Bradford didn't have much time at all against Dallas, but if he has no time this weekend, I mean, it's just going to be absolutely more of the same, because, you know, that pressure that they can bring, that the Jets can bring is deadly. Plus, the Jets have a far better secondary, in my opinion, than Dallas does.
Would you rather have Seattle's future this season or Dallas's future?
Seattle, far and away. Seattle's going to turn it around. They're going to start it this week. And, you know, I mean, look, Cam Chancellor, the loss of him is bad, Dan, but, I mean, no team can play without its absolute anchor starting quarterback for 8 or 9 weeks and think that you can be anything better than 500. I mean, if Dallas is 4-5 without Romo and Dez Bryant, if I were them, I'd sign for that right now.
Really? And Atlanta being 2-0 going to Dallas coming up this weekend.
Atlanta's very, very interesting because Dan Quinn, you know, it just goes to show you that sometimes you hang on to a coach too long. And I think they hung on to Mike Smith. As good a coach as he is, and as much as I like Mike Smith, you know, the Dan Quinn thing is such a breath of fresh air, and the pressure that they're bringing. I mean, Vic Beasley, O'Brien Schofield. I mean, O'Brien Schofield especially has never been anybody's idea of a cornerstone player. But in the first 2 weeks, he's played fantastic for Atlanta, and they need him badly because their pass rush was awful last year.
What would happen if the Bears end up with a number 1 draft pick?
I think they would draft a quarterback, and they'd pay off Jay Cutler.
Just kick him to the curb and then make way for who that new quarterback?
I don't. I mean, unless Cutler really plays well the last 10 weeks of this year. I mean, I think the only reason that they cast their lot with Jay Cutler, the new administration, John Fox, Ryan Pace, is that really, what was their option? Did they have an option? I don't think so. No team can enter a season without the prospect of decent quarterback play. And as much as Jay Cutler has been questionable, you know, in the last 3 or 4 years, you don't want to enter your season without a guy who gives you a chance. And Jay Cutler, at the very least, gives the Bears a chance.
Why do people hate Jay Cutler so much?
I think he's sort of a disagreeable guy in the first place, kind of an unpleasant person in the first place. But there's been a lot of disagreeable, unpleasant people who are not hated like that. I think he doesn't try, and to him, it just doesn't matter except in his locker room. But I don't think that the majority of guys he plays with hate him. They just think he's a kind of a sour, quirky guy.
And then, do you agree with Rodney Harrison saying that the Lions should have come to Matthew Stafford's aid when he got...
I thought so.
Yeah, they knocked him out of bounds.
I thought so, yeah. I mean, you know, look, you have a lot of old-time classic football guys who remind me of the old-time classic baseball guys. You talk to Tommy Lasorda, and he'll scream at you, or he'll scream at anybody who goes out and hugs people on the field before the game. And I think it's the same way with guys like Bill Parcells. Get away from those guys before the game. Come on, let's go. You know, and I mean, Parcells is not as you know, as rabid as Lasorda is in that way. But I just think there's such a brotherhood among players that you know, unless they see something that is really egregious, oftentimes they're not going to go after the other team.
Thank you, Pete. Good to talk to you. I'll see you over the weekend.
Sounds great, Dan. All the best.
Peter King, the MMQB.com.